It was supposed to be a victory speech. That's what the headlines would say. But inside the dim glow of the Ambassador Hotel ballroom, history had already changed. Not because Robert F. Kennedy had just won the California primary, but because somewhere someone had decided he'd never win anything again. It was June 5, 1968. Midnight clung to the walls like a heavy secret. The Vietnam War was burning, the cities were protesting, and America was unraveling. But inside that hotel, for a brief moment, Hope walked on stage. Hope, dressed in a dark suit, flashing that familiar Kennedy smile. The brother of a slain president. The man many believed could stitch a torn nation back together. And then 6 gunshots. Pandemonium. The crowd scattered. Screams erupted. And there he was, Robert Francis Kennedy, collapsed on the cold tile floor of the hotel pantry, eyes flickering, blood pooling beneath him. A teenage busboy named Juan Romero cradled his head. RFK looked up at him and whispered, "Is everybody okay?" Romero's hands were shaking. His white uniform soaked in the senator's blood. All he could say was, "Yes, yes, everybody's okay." But everyone knew, nothing would be okay ever again. The suspect? Caught within seconds. A 24-year-old Palestinian immigrant named Sirhan Sirhan. Pinned down with a .22 caliber revolver still in his hand. He didn't resist. He didn't run. He just looked dazed, like someone waking up in the middle of someone else's nightmare. He would later say he didn't remember firing the gun. Didn't remember being in the pantry. Didn't remember anything. And that, right there, was the first crack in the story they told the world. Because the autopsy told a different story. Robert Kennedy had been shot from behind. From point-blank range. Behind the right ear. But every witness said Sirhan was standing in front of him. Not one. Not two. But over a dozen people said the same thing. And yet, Sirhan was arrested. Tried, convicted, and sentenced. Case closed. Or was it? In the days that followed, Americans didn't just grieve. They questioned. They whispered about that second gun. That strange audio recording. That other man seen running from the hotel, never identified. And beneath the grief, beneath the televised funeral and the slow-moving caisson carrying Bobby past the Lincoln Memorial, there was one chilling realization. 2 brothers, 2 bullets, 2 lies. Because if they could kill another Kennedy in public, right after he won the biggest primary of his life, what else could they do? What else had they already done? The official story was simple. Too simple. Sirhan Bishara Sirhan, 24 years old, angry at Kennedy's support for Israel, walked into the hotel with a revolver, waited in the kitchen pantry and pulled the trigger. But within hours something felt off. Something didn't fit. And when people looked closer, the story began to fall apart like a house of cards built on wet ground. First, there was the angle. According to the official autopsy report by Dr. Thomas Noguchi, the fatal shot entered behind Kennedy's right ear, at point-blank range, no more than 1 inch away. But every eyewitness placed Sirhan in front of Kennedy, several feet away, never behind him. One of RFK's bodyguards, Paul Schrade, who was also shot that night, later said, "I was there. I was hit. And I'm telling you, Sirhan did not shoot Robert Kennedy." A bold claim. From a man who had every reason to want justice. But what if justice was never the goal? Then there was the number of shots. Sirhan's gun held 8 rounds. That's it. But the crime scene? It echoed with more than 8 bullets. A young reporter named Stanislaw Przezinski had brought a portable recorder that night. He captured the sound of the shooting, unintentionally but clearly. Years later, forensic audio experts analyzed the tape. They identified at least 13 distinct shots. Some overlapping. some coming too fast to have come from a single weapon. So if Sirhan's gun only held 8, where did the other 5 come from? More importantly, who fired them? And what about Sirhan himself? The man seemed dazed, detached. He admitted to writing anti-Kennedy rants in a notebook. But when asked about the shooting, he said, over and over, "I don't remember. I don't remember." Doctors who interviewed him later noted strange signs. Hypnosis responses, suggestibility, dissociation. Some even believed Sirhan had been programmed, a real-life Manchurian candidate. This wasn't science fiction. By then, America already knew about MKUltra, the CIA's mind control experiments, LSD, hypnosis, behavioral rewiring. They had experimented on soldiers, prisoners, civilians, sometimes without consent. The question wasn't could they do it. The question was, did they do it to Sirhan? A second gunman. A hypnotized assassin. A buried investigation. Sounds like a movie. But to many who were there, this was real. Painfully real. Multiple witnesses said they saw another man in the pantry. Tall, dark-haired, wearing a blue suit. He was seen fleeing the scene. A woman in a polka dot dress ran beside him, yelling, "We shot him. We shot him." One witness, Sandra Serrano, gave that statement to LAPD detectives the night of the murder. But days later, under pressure, she changed her story. Or rather, they changed it for her. The official investigation? It shut down leads. Evidence of a second gun? Dismissed. Witness contradictions? Ignored. Photographic evidence that might have shown extra bullet holes in door frames? Lost in the archives. The LAPD and FBI boxed the case tight, sealed it with political duct tape and threw away the key. But a few people kept asking questions. Journalists, lawyers, and the people who knew Bobby Kennedy, really knew him, couldn't let it go. Because this wasn't just a murder. It was a message. I didn't kill him. I don't even remember pulling the trigger. That's what Sirhan Sirhan said. Not once, but for decades. And the strange part is he's not lying. At least, not in the way we usually think. Because when psychiatrists, hypnotists, and forensic psychologists dug into his mind, they didn't find hatred. They didn't find political fanaticism. They found emptiness. Like something had been scrubbed away. Or wiped, or replaced. Dr. Daniel Brown, a Harvard psychologist who studied Sirhan for over 60 hours under hypnosis, said, "He was in a trance state when the shooting happened. Someone had conditioned him, rehearsed him like an actor. An actor. On a stage he didn't even know he'd stepped onto." Under hypnosis, Sirhan could describe details of being at a gun range, shooting over and over. But when asked about RFK, he froze. Or worse, he obeyed post-hypnotic suggestions without realizing it. Dr. Brown concluded that Sirhan had likely been subjected to coercive persuasion, a mix of hypnosis, suggestion, and psychological manipulation. That's not just theory. It's the exact kind of thing MKUltra was designed to test. Remember, by 1968, MKUltra was still running in the shadows. The CIA had experimented on over 80 institutions, universities, prisons, even hospitals. They tested hypnosis as a trigger for violent behavior. They dosed people with LSD without consent. They tried to create programmable assassins. And they had a file for it, MKUltra Subproject 136, Behavioral Modifications Under Hypnosis. Let that sink in. The government had already explored how to make a man kill without knowing he did it. And here was Sirhan, an immigrant with no prior violent history, no criminal record, no clear motive, suddenly executing the most promising political figure in America, with zero memory of it. Coincidence? Or the perfect cover? Now rewind to that night. Sirhan had been drinking coffee in the hotel pantry. That's where witnesses saw him, calm, quiet, not hiding. Then suddenly he's lunging, gun drawn, firing wildly. Not at RFK's head, but straight ahead. Most of his bullets struck others in the crowd. Experts later pointed out, Sirhan couldn't have fired the fatal shot. The angle was wrong. The distance too far. But what if that was the point? What if Sirhan wasn't meant to kill? What if he was meant to distract? While someone else, someone close, someone trusted, finished the job? It's not just conspiracy. Even Robert Kennedy Jr., RFK's own son, publicly stated in 2018 that he doesn't believe Sirhan acted alone. He visited Sirhan in prison, talked to him, listened, and then he said, "The wrong man is behind bars." But that truth is inconvenient, because if Sirhan didn't kill RFK, then who did? And who covered it up? The LAPD had reasons to close the case. The CIA had reasons to stay quiet. And the American people? They had a funeral to mourn, a war to protest, and a nation to hold together with trembling hands. Sometimes grief is easier than truth. He wasn't just another candidate. By 1968, Robert F. Kennedy had become something else entirely. A symbol, a threat, a reckoning. He wasn't his brother. Jack had been polished, careful, presidential. Bobby was fire wrapped in skin, restless, angry, transformed by grief and war. After JFK's assassination, RFK had walked through fire. He questioned the Warren Report. He called out the Vietnam War. He marched through inner-city neighborhoods while armored limos waited blocks away. And then he ran. But he didn't just run against other Democrats. He ran against the very machinery of America. He spoke of dismantling the CIA, exposing the FBI. He blamed corporate greed for poverty. He spoke of justice for minorities, not just in sound bites but in blood, sweat, and tear gas. He was, in short, making powerful enemies. Enemies who didn't forget what happened the last time a Kennedy made it to the White House. By the time RFK entered the California primary, he wasn't just winning votes, he was becoming inevitable. And that terrified the status quo. Because the idea of Bobby Kennedy as president didn't just threaten political parties. It threatened entire systems. Military interests, corporate empires, shadow operations left over from Cold War secrecy. What if RFK got into office and opened the files on Cuba? On Vietnam? On his brother's death? What if he tore the curtain down? So they stopped him before he could get there. The kitchen pantry. A staged lone gunman. A dazed, dissociative trigger man. And one perfect shot, behind the ear. It was clean. It was chaotic. It was the end of something. And what followed was silence. Sirhan was locked away. The evidence buried. The questions smothered under eulogies and eternal flames. The Kennedy family mourned again, this time without illusions. Ted Kennedy in his eulogy said, "My brother need not be idealized or enlarged in death beyond what he was in life. But let him be remembered as a good and decent man who saw wrong and tried to right it." But it wasn't just a man who died that day. It was momentum. It was the movement. It was the idea that America could truly be transformed from within, by someone who believed in the people, not just the politics. To this day the questions won't die. Was Sirhan a Manchurian candidate? Was there a second shooter? Why did the government refuse to reopen the case, even as new evidence surfaced? And most haunting of all, did they kill Robert Kennedy to kill what he stood for? Maybe the most chilling part isn't how he died. It's what might have happened if he'd lived. What if he had won the presidency? Ended the Vietnam War? bridged the racial divide before it exploded? Told the truth about what really happened to his brother in Dallas? We'll never know, because the bullet took more than a man. It took a future. And in its place, it left silence. The kind that comes not just after a gunshot, but after a cover-up. One Kennedy died for his country. The second died trying to save it. And we're still living with the echoes of what they left behind. We'll never know what Robert Kennedy could have done. But maybe that was the plan. What do you think America would have looked like if Bobby Kennedy had lived? Would there have been no Watergate scandal? No extended Vietnam War? Let's imagine the future that was stolen, and talk about it in the comments. And if this video stirred something in you, don't scroll past. Like, share and subscribe. Because history doesn't repeat itself. It's just never been held accountable.